Good morning, good morning, good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for our morning devotional. I tried Facebook Live 4 times this morning. It did not work, so we're doing it through YouTube Live, and I will be posting it on our Live Church Facebook. But good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. Again, I've been here working for probably the past 45 minutes trying to correct some of these technical issues that have been going on. So please forgive me, thank you, and bear with me. I wanted to talk to you this morning about, based on some of the stuff that are going on, current events right now, things that are happening. Proverbs 10:12 says, hatred stirs up conflict, love covers all wrongs. And so we live in a world right now where things are happening, where things are going wrong, where there's a lot of hate, where there's a lot of strife, where there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of racial tension, there's rioting, there's looting. And so I go back to how people could be hurtful, people could be hateful. And one of my mentors once told me that in order to stop a war, we need to love. We need to love. So I want to read to you this morning out of 1 Samuel chapter 24. Get my glasses. 1 Samuel chapter 24. And we find a story here in the Bible about the similarities about what hatred does as opposed to what love does. And remember that I'm the topic of this conversation came out of Proverbs 10:12, which is hate stirs up conflict, love covers all wrongs. So let's read 1 Samuel chapter 24, and I'm going to read most of the chapter. And it says, let me preface this first. So Saul loved David. Saul is the king of Israel, and he loved David. David loved Saul. But things have happened. And now that relationship is strained. And so we find Saul is going after David. And I'm not talking about just going after David, sort of, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm going to straighten these things out. He's going to take David's life. He hates David at this moment. He hates him to the point. This is where we find ourselves in the story. It says, then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David. So he's not just angry, he is stirred up. He is just began World War III against David. He's taking 3,000 men with him, because that's what hatred does, by the way. It gets those around you to try to hate those as well. Very much what's going on in the world today. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men on the rocks of the wild goats. David is hiding from Saul in a cave. So he came to the sheepfolds by the road where there was a cave. And Saul went in to attend to his needs. He's going to the restroom. He's going to a rest stop here. David and his men were staying in the recesses of the cave. Saul's going into the cave, and there's where David's hiding. Saul doesn't know that David's in there, and all of a sudden, here comes Saul, the enemy of David, into the cave. Saul's unaware that his enemy is in there. And then the men of David said to him, this is the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, that you may do to him as it seems good to you. So there's someone that's after David. Saul is after David. And it just so happens that Saul comes in to relieve himself in the cave where David is at. And David's man is saying, there he is. There he is. There's your enemy. There is the man that hates you. And that's what the world tells you. This person hates you. This person is against you. What are you going to do about that? Here's what David does. And David arose secretly, cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Now it happened afterward that David's heart troubled him because he had cut Saul's robe. And he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him. You hear David's heart? David's heart? Saul is after him. Saul's after him to kill him. Saul is his enemy. There is conflict. Saul has brought 3,000 men to get rid of David. What does David do? His heart is troubled. David is a man after God's heart. His heart is troubled. Saul is after him, and yet David's heart is troubled, even at the mere fact that he cut a piece of his robe off. And he goes on to say that Saul goes out of the cave, and so David's all stirred up, and he's like, oh my goodness, I cut a piece of his robe off. I'm upset even at that. So David runs after Saul, comes out of the cave, out in the open, where Saul can easily take his life. And David also arose afterwards, went out of the cave, and called out to Saul, saying, my lord the king. And when Saul looked to him behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed down. You get that? David could have killed Saul, but he didn't. In fact, he has remorse. He loves Saul. He loves Saul. It says, and when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed down. See the position that David took? Although there was an enemy after him, David chose to love his enemy. Remember Proverbs 10:12, hate stirs up conflict, love covers all wrongs. Are you with me, church? Love covers all wrongs. David had an opportunity to kill Saul, but instead he didn't because he loved Saul. So what was his action? His action was to love. He bowed down. In other words, too many of us are reacting to hate. We're reacting to hate. And how do we react to hate? It's countercultural, right? We react to hate by loving. That's what we're called to do as Christians. That's very countercultural because the world, much like David's men, will tell you, no, kill, react to hate with hate. No, 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 no. So it says, why do you listen to the words of men who say, this is David talking, indeed David seeks you harm. Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hand in the cave, and someone urged me to kill you. His men were saying, there's Saul, there's your enemy, kill him, because that's what the world says. In other words, when someone hates you, you should hate them back. No, that's not how Jesus taught us. It says, moreover, my Father, see the corner of your robe in my hand, for in that I cut the corner of your robe and did not kill you. Know and see that there is neither evil nor rebellion in my hand. He goes on to say, but my hand shall not be against you. And then David quotes Proverbs of the ancients saying, wickedness proceeds from the wicked. Hate stirs up hate, stirs up hate, stirs up hate, stirs up conflict, stirs up war. And David is saying, no, my hand's not going to be against you. Even though you come to me with hate, I'm going to treat you with love. Because hate stirs up conflict, love covers all wrong. So what is Saul's reaction? This is Saul's reaction. He responds with this. You are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, whereas I have rewarded you with evil. See, the world wants to tell you, hate those who hate you. Jesus tells you, love those who love you. Let's go to Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, verse 27. These are the words of Jesus. Jesus says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who spitefully use you." Some versions say, pray for those who abuse you. To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. The words of Jesus, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He says, love your enemies. Love your enemies. You know how you stop a war? You love. You love, you love. Because hate stirs up conflict. Love covers all wrongs. Don't do what the world tells you to do, to hate your neighbor. Do what Jesus tells you to do, to love your neighbor. And do what Jesus tells you to do, and love your enemies. Do good to them. Bless them. Pray for them. That's showing them Jesus. I hope this message blesses you. I pray that you would share this with someone who may need to hear this. God love you. Thank you for joining us.